On the top floor of a luxury condominium in New York, Avery Morgan, who was about to turn 27, gazed at the glittering nightscape of Manhattan from the terrace at dusk. The urban noise didn't reach the height of the 50th floor. Instead, the cold air tinged with sunset enveloped her. Avery's chestnut brown hair fluttered in the evening breeze. In her hand, she clutched the key to the condominium, bought with the inheritance from her father, Thomas. The property was worth over $10 million, but it was just a fraction of the enormous inheritance she had received. The sun has set, hasn't it? Aren't you cold? Victoria Morgan, her stepmother, called out from behind. Known for her elegant demeanor and impeccable fashion sense, Victoria was a prominent figure in New York's high society. However, despite her sophisticated appearance, her eyes harbored a cold calculation. "I'm fine, I want to stay here a little longer," Avery responded in a measured tone. After her father's death, her relationship with her stepmother had remained superficial. Victoria studied Avery's profile. Having lost her father at a young age, Avery was now tasked with managing Thomas's estate, rumored to be worth over $100 million, enough to stir Victoria's ambitions. Avery had inherited more than just real estate. She also held a significant share in the investment company her father had built. However, full control over the estate was restricted until she turned 30, and until then, it was under the oversight of the board of directors and Victoria. Pretending to be a loving stepmother, Victoria spoke gently. "Dinner is ready. It's your favorite, poached salmon." Inside, however, her schemes to seize Avery's fortune were steadily progressing. Avery nodded silently and took one last look at the night view. The lights of the skyscrapers reflected in her eyes, seemingly accentuating the loneliness and anxiety deep within her. At a charity party for pediatric cancer support held in a luxury Manhattan hotel, Avery, dressed in a champagne gold chiffon dress, engaged in gentle conversations with the donors. At the party, a man in his late 20s caught her eye. With handsome features yet a lonely aura, he was jotting something down in a notebook and using it to communicate. "Good evening." Avery approached him with a natural smile. The man looked up in surprise and began writing in his notebook. "Nice to meet you. I'm Adam Foster." Reading the elegantly written words, Avery smiled. "I'm Avery Morgan. Are you enjoying the party?" Adam wrote again in his notebook. "Yes, it's a wonderful event. Supporting pediatric cancer patients is also important to me." They continued to converse through written notes. Adam worked as a teacher at a special education school. His genuine personality and deep love for the children were evident in his words. In a corner of the venue, a pair of cold eyes watched Avery and Adam's conversation. Victoria, observing their smiles, thought of a plan. A relationship with a person with a speech disability. This could be useful. She smirked slightly. The harsh scrutiny of high society and the conservative values of the board of directors. In Victoria's mind, the gears of conspiracy quietly began to turn. At the end of the party, Avery and Adam exchanged contact information. She was genuinely looking forward to interacting with this sincere teacher, unaware of how this meeting would dramatically change her life. Back in her top-floor luxury condominium, Avery fell asleep that night with a rare sense of peace. The conversation with Adam had left a touch of warmth in her heart, but it was merely the calm before the storm that was about to come. Victoria was dining with the board's dignitaries in a private room at a high-end restaurant near Central Park. The soft sunlight filtered through the window, gently illuminating the elegantly plated French cuisine. It seems Avery has become friendly with a teacher from a special education school. Victoria mentioned casually, tilting her wine glass elegantly. "He has a speech disability, but he seems very sincere." One of the directors frowned. "A successor of the Morgan family involved with a person with disabilities. I'm concerned," Victoria said with a grave look. Avery's kind heart is wonderful, but it can sometimes cloud her judgment. It's a matter of the company's image. The executives exchanged glances. Morgan Investments shareholders and clients were predominantly conservative, affluent individuals. A teacher with a speech disability would clearly seem unfit as a partner for the successor. However, intervening in Avery's personal life. Another director hesitated. Victoria smiled quietly. Of course, I don't intend to intervene. But, if they were to marry, it might raise questions about her judgment. Then, we might need to reconsider the timing of transferring her estate management rights. Understanding her implications, the directors nodded silently. If Avery's property rights were restricted, control would concentrate in the board and Victoria. After lunch, Victoria wiped her mouth contentedly. The plan was proceeding as expected. Next, she would approach Adam. With a teacher's salary, living in Manhattan wasn't easy. If she added financial temptation. On her way out, she pulled out her cell phone and called a private detective. Gather as much information as possible on Adam Foster. Her cold voice echoed in the opulent restaurant lobby. At dusk, Victoria walked home elegantly as the autumn leaves in Central Park turned red in the sunset. Behind her, leaves danced in the wind, a prelude to the conspiracy she was orchestrating. Central Park in autumn was bustling with people out for walks. Avery and Adam sat on a bench near Bethesda Fountain, watching the autumn leaves. Adam wrote in his notebook, "I love this season the most. It's perfect for playing in the park with the kids." Avery smiled and nodded. "Can you tell me more about your work at the special education school?" Adam's hand moved quickly across the paper. "Children are truly pure. Even with disabilities, they accept them as part of their individuality and support each other. They don't mind my speech impairment at all." Adam wrote in his notebook. "That's wonderful," Avery said, genuinely moved. "Could I possibly join as a volunteer next time?" Adam nodded happily and began writing something again. His gestures had a curious charm. Even without speaking, there was a clear understanding growing between them. Meanwhile, in the upscale office district of Manhattan, Victoria was meeting with private detective Jim Collins. There are some puzzling aspects to Adam Foster's background. Jim reported as he spread out the documents. His work history at the special education school is less than a year. Records before that are extremely vague. And his previous job? The records list another school, but his name isn't found there either. Addresses and salary records all seem to have appeared out of nowhere recently. Victoria narrowed her eyes. "So, a fabricated background?" "It's a strong possibility, but we have no confirmation yet. Continue the investigation. Look especially for any information that could be a weakness for him." At that time, Avery had started volunteering at the special education school. She was learning basic sign language, trying to expand her communication with Adam. "I had a really fun day today," Avery said as she left, incorporating her clumsy sign language. Adam responded with a gentle smile and wrote in his notebook, "Your presence encourages the children." As Avery walked through the streets at dusk, her heart was filled with warm emotions. Yet, this happy time was merely the calm before the storm that was approaching. A message and a picture from an unknown number arrived on Adam's mobile phone. "There's something important about Avery. Meet me at this place at 7 tonight." The sender was Victoria Morgan. After finishing his workday at the special education school, Adam headed to the upscale Italian restaurant in Manhattan that Victoria had specified. At the entrance, Victoria's secretary greeted him and led him to a private room. Outside the window, the rain continued to fall quietly. "I've been waiting for you," Victoria began, pouring expensive wine into a glass. "There's something I want to discuss with you about Avery's future." Adam reached for his notebook, but Victoria stopped him. "Let's talk frankly today, without the notebook." She directed a cold gaze towards Adam. "There are too many unclear points in your background. Work records at the special education school, previous employment records, all of it suddenly appeared recently. It's as if you're a fabricated person." Adam kept his expression unchanged, maintaining his composure. He had anticipated this day. Victoria investigating him was part of his calculations. But no matter what your true identity is, it's a convenient situation for me. Victoria elegantly pulled an envelope from her handbag and placed it on the table. This is part of the payment. $100,000. If your marriage to Avery goes through, I'll prepare an additional $900,000. Adam reached for the envelope. His lack of disturbance at the sum indicated his thorough preparation. Avery is too pure. Leaving her in charge of the estate management would surely jeopardize the company. I'm sorry, but your existence will be unacceptable to the board of directors. Marrying someone with a disability will call her judgment into question. Even after hearing those words, Adam did not show any anger. Instead, he felt a sense of accomplishment at eliciting discriminatory remarks from her. Adam slowly took out his notebook and wrote, "Why did you choose me? Simple. Avery has opened her heart to you. And..." Victoria lowered her voice and continued, "If an unfortunate accident were to happen to her after marriage, that wouldn't be surprising either. In that case, additional compensation can be considered." Adam's eyes briefly flashed with intensity, but he quickly returned to a submissive expression and wrote in his notebook, "I understand." Amidst the quiet sound of rain, Victoria smiled contentedly. She was unaware that the brief flash of light in Adam's eyes was the overture to her own downfall. As Christmas approached, Avery was helping prepare for the special education school's Christmas concert. 2 months since their meeting in October. Adam continued to write perfect timing and perfect words. "My mother was a pianist." One day, Adam showed her that note. "That's why music is an essential part of my life." Avery deeply resonated with those words, having learned the scent and rhythm of songs from her mother as a child. On the night before Thanksgiving, the two were looking at the stars on the school's rooftop. Adam wrote in his notebook, "When I look up at the sky, I feel that even without words, our hearts can communicate." At that moment, Avery became certain. This was not a chance encounter. It was the person fate had led her to from heaven. Adam's sincere character, deep insight, and above all, the peace he brought to her heart were what Avery had been searching for. Their presence gradually became a topic of conversation in the Upper East Side's social circles. The Morgan family heiress bringing a disabled teacher to prestigious charity events sparked quiet discussions among the older elites. The Morgan heir with someone like that? No, I think it shows her kind heart. But considering the size of that estate. Such conversations were exchanged in whispers at country club luncheons and private club tea parties. And those rumors were always arranged to reach Victoria's ears. While Victoria seemed to quietly observe the situation, she was steadily making moves behind the scenes. That night, Victoria was in her home office, reading a report delivered by her secretary. Avery and Adam had attended the Thanksgiving dinner together. Additionally, Adam had been invited to the Christmas charity event. "It's happening faster than I expected." Victoria sipped her whiskey, gazing out at the Manhattan nightscape. If she left the two alone, Avery would become more deeply involved. The next morning, Victoria called an emergency meeting of the board of directors. A solemn atmosphere filled Morgan Investments' boardroom. The directors, seated around a long table, looked serious. "Shareholder concerns are increasing." Victoria began in a calm voice. "We've been receiving many inquiries about Avery's relationship with that teacher." The directors exchanged looks. Indeed, in recent weeks, the voices of concern from major shareholders had grown. Morgan Investments was a company built on the trust of conservative, wealthy clients. "I share these concerns," stated the lead director, Robert Harris, gravely. "We need to hear directly from Avery about this matter." "Let's call her in." 10 minutes later, Avery entered the boardroom. 8 directors were staring at her. "Could you explain your relationship with Mr. Adam Foster?" Robert asked, his voice calm yet authoritative. Avery straightened her back and responded firmly. Adam is a special education teacher with a speech disability. However, his passion for education and his sincerity are among the most. Please wait, Avery. Robert interrupted. As a successor to Morgan Investments, I have serious doubts about your judgment. Objections began to arise one after another. Consider our client base. A teacher's salary won't support your standard of living. You're still too young. You need to think more carefully. The voices of the directors cornered Avery. Victoria, feigning concern, spoke up. Avery, your kind heart is wonderful, but sometimes emotions can cloud your judgment, especially in this position. Avery looked deeply hurt. However, in her heart, she saw Adam's sincere smile. His earnest effort to learn sign language. His gentle gaze as he interacted with the children. And above all, the promises they shared under the starry sky. My decision is not based on emotion. Avery responded quietly yet firmly. I deeply respect Adam's character and his passion as an educator. And I believe he is the right partner for my life. A heavy silence filled the boardroom. Avery's words exceeded the director's expectations. Victoria smiled inwardly, pleased. Everything was proceeding as planned. Avery's defense would likely reinforce the impression of her lack of judgment. But what no one realized was that the content of this meeting had already reached the ears of a certain individual. A week had passed since the board meeting. At dusk, as snow began to fall in Central Park, Avery waited on a park bench for Adam. Despite the harsh cold, her cheeks were flushed. I'm sorry to keep you waiting. Adam wrote in his notebook as he hurried over, asking in sign language. Are you cold? Avery shook her head and smiled, signing back. I'm fine. Adam presented a brown paper bag. Inside were 2 warm hot chocolates. Avery felt her heart warm from his thoughtfulness. I heard about the board meeting. Adam wrote carefully. I'm sorry for the trouble I've caused. No, Adam. Avery took his hand. You are irreplaceable to me. Adam's eyes wavered. He seemed about to say something but then returned to his notebook. But considering your position. Position doesn't matter. Avery interrupted firmly. My father taught me what truly matters. It's not money or status. It's sincerity and the courage to protect the ones you love. At that moment, Adam's hand trembled. Avery didn't notice, but it was a sign of his inner turmoil. Snow quietly accumulated on their shoulders. Adam didn't write anything for a long time. He just held Avery's hand and looked up at the twilight sky. That night, Victoria was in her home office on the phone. Yes, proceed as planned. Avery's feelings are deepening just as we expected. She smiled contentedly. However, she was unaware of the genuine emotions beginning to take root in Adam's heart. Sometimes, people fall into the traps they set themselves. Victoria had yet to understand this truth. In a high-end bridal shop in Manhattan, Avery was being fitted for a wedding dress. The pure white silk caressed her skin gently. Her reflection in the mirror showed her confusion. Just 2 weeks earlier, Victoria had visited her room. Avery, I need to talk to you about your future. Victoria started earnestly. Since that day at the board meeting, there have been serious doubts about your judgment. If we don't solidify your relationship, it could even affect your inheritance. But this might also be a good opportunity. What do you mean? The world isn't as kind as you think. People are calculative and selfish, regardless of appearances. Especially people in your position are often exploited by others. That's why I want you to learn the strength to live by your own will, through marrying someone with a disability, without being swayed by others' opinions or judgments. This could be an important lesson for you. Of course, I'm supporting you both. Victoria smiled gently, but her eyes briefly flashed with coldness, contradicting her words. But Adam and I are still. That's exactly why you need to make a decision quickly. Victoria said gently, yet firmly. If you truly care about Adam, then you should demonstrate it through marriage. That way, the board will understand your resolve. Avery was still hesitant. Her feelings for Adam were strong, and she had considered marriage, but they had only known each other for 3 months. She wanted more time. However, Victoria brought up marriage every day. If things continue this way, you might even be forced to end your relationship with Adam. If you truly love each other, timing shouldn't matter. Such words gradually shook Avery's heart. Now, Avery stood in front of a mirror, dressed in a pure white gown. You look beautiful, Avery. Victoria sat elegantly on a sofa, sipping champagne and smiling. Adam will surely be delighted. Following this, the wedding preparations were rapidly driven by Victoria. The date was set for February 14th, Valentine's Day, with a ceremony planned at the city's Grand Cathedral. By the way, may I handle the speech at the reception? I have some special words of blessing prepared for you and Adam. Avery saw a fleeting, ominous glint in her stepmother's eyes through the mirror. But it was just for a moment. Meanwhile, Adam was in his apartment, staring at an envelope. It was the final payment promissory note from Victoria. His hands trembled slightly. Avery's feelings had grown in a direction he hadn't anticipated. Faced with her pure trust, Adam found it increasingly difficult to endure. But he couldn't back out now. He had reasons he couldn't disclose to anyone. On the eve of the wedding, a rehearsal dinner was held in the grand ballroom of a luxurious hotel. Champagne was poured, and words of blessing were exchanged, with Victoria sporting a triumphant smile. Unbeknownst to everyone, this glamorous banquet was the last before all truths would be revealed. The next day, cold February light streamed through the cathedral's stained glass, casting rainbow hues on the pure white aisle. In the bridal room, Avery made her final preparations. The lace of her wedding dress tangled slightly with her trembling fingertips. Nervous? Victoria asked from behind, fastening a pearl necklace around Avery's neck and staring at her reflection in the mirror. Don't worry. Everything is going according to plan. Though Avery felt an ominous tone in those words, she had no time to dwell on them. The cathedral's organ began to play the wedding march. Avery took a deep breath and stepped onto the aisle, feeling the eyes of the attendees on her as she walked forward. Adam waited at the altar, his black tuxedo enhancing his dignified presence. As the priest began to speak, Victoria quietly stood up. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a few words to say. It was an unplanned move. Adam's expression tensed for a moment. I also have some words of blessing for this couple. Victoria smiled meaningfully. As you all know, the board and I have been deeply concerned about Avery's naivety. Marrying a teacher with a disability is far too reckless for an heiress of the Morgan family. Mom, stop! Avery shouted. Just then. There's no need for that, Victoria. A clear, strong voice echoed through the cathedral. It was Adam's voice. The cathedral was shocked. Adam, supposedly with a speech disability, was speaking fluently. Avery looked at Adam next to her in disbelief. I am FBI Special Agent Matthew Ryan. Adam declared calmly. And, Victoria Morgan, you are under arrest for serial murder. What? Victoria's voice cracked. We have discovered your involvement in a series of murders targeting the wealthy. Adam stepped forward. Thomas Morgan's supposed accident was also orchestrated by you. Avery's face paled as murmurs rose among the attendees. What are you talking about? Do you have evidence? Victoria tried to regain composure, but her voice shook. Yes, we do. The recording of you proposing the murder of Avery, and the documents regarding Thomas Morgan's accident. Everything is in order. Before Adam could finish, police entered the cathedral. Victoria attempted to flee, but was quickly restrained. Let go of me. Who do you think you are? Her previously elegant demeanor vanished, and Victoria screamed in a frenzy. Her face showed a madness never seen before. I can't be arrested here. Not here. She tried to shake off the police while glaring at Avery. I should have dealt with you long ago, like Thomas. That accident in the mountains was my perfect plan. I needed more money to gain the power suitable for someone like me. The attendees gasped and stood frozen, stunned by the unfolding scene. What would a pampered girl like you know? The world is much dirtier than you think. I clawed my way up. All the men I've stepped on to get here were the same. Foolish and greedy. Victoria's voice twisted as her refined facade crumbled, sounding like it was breaking apart. Avery stared blankly at the scene before her. Her pure white wedding dress suddenly felt heavy. Victoria's true goal was the entire Morgan family fortune, explained Matthew Ryan, quietly in the FBI's interrogation room. Seated on a hard chair in her wedding dress, Avery listened intently, occasionally wiping her makeup-smeared cheeks. She would approach wealthy men, marry them to gain their trust, and then stage their deaths as accidents to inherit their fortunes. We had suspicions and were conducting investigations, but we lacked concrete evidence. And she approached my father. Avery's voice cracked. Yes. 3 years after her previous husband's death, Victoria met and married Thomas. Then, 2 years ago, she staged an accident during a mountain trip. Matthew chose his words carefully as he continued. Your turn was next. With a pale expression, Avery listened as Matthew cautiously proceeded. Victoria planned to kill you after our marriage to inherit the fortune. Every proposition she made to me was recorded. Outside the window, the flashes from press cameras were visible. The Morgan family scandal was already causing a media stir. You've been lying to me all along, Avery said with a trembling voice. I approached her as an investigator to expose her crimes. But Matthew choked on his words, his face reflecting his regret and turmoil. A heavy silence fell in the interrogation room. Truth sometimes has the power to tear human hearts apart. Avery stood up and walked unsteadily toward the door. Avery, That's enough, she said without turning back. You saved my life. But at the same time, you tore my heart apart. Now, I don't want to hear anything else. The door closed quietly behind her, leaving Matthew to deeply sigh, feeling that his pursuit of justice had simultaneously destroyed something precious. Back at the Morgan family penthouse, Avery stared at a photograph of her father. Outside the window, a winter storm was approaching. Her father, Thomas, had always been kind, honest, and trusted by everyone. Yet he had been deceived by Victoria and lost his life. Moreover, Victoria had planned to take hers next. Sinking deep into the sofa, Avery closed her eyes. Just hours ago, she was supposed to be a bride, vowing to share her life with a loved one. But it had all been a stage of deception. Matthew Ryan. He too had deceived her. He certainly saved her life. But at the same time, he trampled on her heart. Father. Avery spoke to the photograph. What should I believe? The phone rang, displaying an unknown number. It was Matthew's voice when she answered. Avery, let's talk. No more. She coldly cut him off. I appreciate that you saved my life. But no more words are needed. You were just doing your job. It's not like that. It started as a mission, yes. But as I spent time with you, my feelings. I don't want to hear words that are tainted with lies and truth anymore. Avery hung up. Outside the window, snow began to fall. The cold, white crystals quietly covered the streets of Manhattan, mirroring Avery's frozen heart. As a refreshing May breeze swept through Manhattan, the trees in Central Park turned a deep green, and the cherry blossoms gave way to flowering dogwoods, signaling the onset of New York's early summer. Avery, in the boardroom of Morgan Investments, proposed a major shift. I want to reconsider our investment strategies. Her voice was more forceful than ever. From the shocking events at her wedding 3 months ago, she had learned much. Specifically, I propose shifting towards socially responsible investments, especially establishing funds for disability support and education. The directors displayed expressions of surprise, but there was no hesitation in Avery's eyes. Victoria's incident caused us to lose much credibility. But this is also an opportunity to regain it by transforming into a more transparent, socially contributing corporation. Avery felt the atmosphere in the room change. Morgan Investments is the company my father built. He always considered not just profit but the happiness of people. It's time we return to that spirit. May sunlight streamed into the boardroom, illuminating Avery's profile. Yet, the memories with Matthew still weighed heavily on her heart. The man she had loved, or rather, who had just been acting. Even now, that distinction was blurry for her. On a sunny early summer afternoon in Central Park, Avery sat on a bench near Bethesda Terrace, a favorite spot of her father's. The spray from the fountain sparkled rainbow hues in the sunlight, and occasional breezes gently stirred her long chestnut brown hair. Father. I believe my choices were not wrong. Avery held a newspaper, the front page declaring, Morgan family stepmother sentenced to life for serial murder. Victoria's trial had concluded surprisingly quickly. Matthew's gathered evidence was perfect, thoroughly proving her crimes, evoking complex feelings in Avery. The truth that her father's death had been a murder, not an accident, and that she had been the next target, had not fully allowed Avery's heart to recover. But it also proved the perfection of Matthew's lies. His acting as a language-disabled teacher, his communicated notes, all had been meticulously planned. Avery's smartphone vibrated. A message from Matthew. He had been reaching out consistently since the wedding day. Avery, please let me talk. I lied, yes. But my feelings for you. Avery didn't finish reading the message, turning off the screen. For 3 months, Matthew had tried to contact her through letters, emails, and calls. He didn't know how to give up. But she hadn't accepted any of it. Listening to the fountain, Avery closed her eyes. Memories of Matthew surged like scenes from a movie. The interactions with children at the special education school. Promises under the stars in Central Park. That first earnest gaze at the charity party. Was it all just an act? Or... No. Avery shook her head. I need to focus on finding my own path now. She stood up and looked up at the skyscrapers of Manhattan. The legacy and status her father had left her imposed great responsibilities. Today was important. It was the day to demonstrate the new direction of Morgan Investments. On her way to the office, Avery stopped at her favorite cafe. Holding a warm latte, she watched the people passing by the window, each carrying their own life and thoughts. I must also move forward. She vowed silently and left the cafe. Under the clear sky, she stood taller than usual. Despite her wounded heart, it was time to take a decisive step. Portraits of past CEOs of Morgan Investments lined the hallway she walked down, all watching as Avery approached. She paused briefly in front of the last portrait, that of her father Thomas, seeking courage from his gentle smiling face. Jane, the secretary, approached to announce the start of the board meeting. Everyone is gathered. Avery nodded slightly, straightened her back, held her proposal tightly, and opened the meeting room door. The pearl necklace that was her father's keepsake glinted faintly. We are taking a major turn towards social responsibility in our investments. Her voice resonated more strongly in the boardroom than she had expected. Specifically, I propose 3 new projects. First, the establishment of an educational support fund, particularly focusing on improving the educational environment for children with disabilities. A director frowned, a person who had once doubted Avery's judgment along with Victoria. But now, Avery's gaze held no doubt. Second, the development of a disability employment promotion program. As a corporate social responsibility, we will create a system that recognizes and supports diversity. Avery briefly remembered Matthew. His language disability had been a facade, but the real struggles of people with actual disabilities were genuine. Supporting them would indeed be meaningful. And third, Avery's voice filled with emotion. I propose proactive investment in victim support organizations. A silence filled the room. Everyone understood the personal experiences behind her proposals. The incident with Victoria taught us a great lesson. Wealth is not merely a tool for profit. It must be a means to contribute to society and enrich people's lives. That is what my father truly desired. The expressions of the directors gradually changed. Avery's words carried a weight beyond mere idealism, born from someone who had experienced suffering. Please see the detailed financial plans in the documents provided. Avery flipped through the proposal pages, which contained thorough market analyses and financial forecasts. It was a feasible proposal that balanced idealism with reality. The proposals were unanimously approved. Avery sighed deeply and looked out the window. The high-rise buildings of Manhattan reflected the early summer sunlight, seemingly blessing her new start. That night, for the first time in a long while, Avery opened an email from Matthew. It said that he had resigned from the FBI and started a non-profit organization to support crime victims. Incredible. Avery murmured to herself. The timing coincided eerily with her new investment strategy. It was an irony too poignant for mere coincidence. The email concluded. This is not an act to seek your forgiveness. I have simply found my own way to atone. Avery slowly closed the email. Outside, the evening sky blushed red. Her heart was not fully healed, but perhaps a true change was beginning. In the midst of a stiflingly hot New York summer, Avery, seated in the passenger's side, directed the driver, Jane, towards their destination. As they left the upscale office district, the scenery gradually changed. The afternoon sun cast deep shadows over the old buildings. This visit was part of a new project by Morgan Investments, aimed at understanding the realities of their support activities. As the car approached its destination, Avery's heart rate quickened. She had learned from Matthew's email last week that this center was his new base of operations. Whether today's visit was a disguised coincidence or a genuine one, Avery herself couldn't be sure. Upon exiting the car, they were greeted by a surprisingly well-maintained three-story building. A modest sign at the entrance read, Hope Victim Support Center. At the reception, a young staff member began to guide them. Today, the center's director was supposed to guide you personally, but an urgent meeting came up. Just then, a familiar voice echoed from down the hall. Avery. Turning around, she saw Matthew standing there, not in a suit, but in a casual shirt. Both were momentarily lost for words. In the hallway, where only the hum of air conditioning filled the silence, it seemed as though time had stopped. Sunlight streaming through the window created a thin strip of light between them. What are you doing here? Avery asked first, surprised by the slight tremble in her voice. This is my organization. Matthew replied quietly. I left the FBI to start this work, hoping to help heal the wounds of victims and their families. Avery's expression was complex. The man before her had once deceived her but also saved her life. Now, they shared a common mission. The sincerity that was missing in his past performances now genuinely shone through his eyes. I would like to take a tour, Avery stated, maintaining her composure. As a potential new investment for us. Matthew nodded. Let me show you around, starting with the group therapy room. As they toured the center, they spoke only of professional matters, but an unspoken emotion lingered in the air, their eyes occasionally meeting, sharing unvoiced thoughts. As they were leaving, Matthew spoke up. Avery, I did approach you as part of my duties that day, but I don't want to hear it now. Avery cut him off. However, her voice was not as cold as before. It carried a mix of deep sadness and a desire to understand. On her way back to the car, Avery stopped to look up at the sky. The summer clouds were slowly changing shape. She felt her once unchanging heart beginning to sway. As September arrived, New York gradually began to feel like autumn. The trees in Central Park still held their green, but hints of yellow were beginning to blend in. In the boardroom of the support center, Avery was reviewing documents. A major support package from Morgan Investments had been approved, and new programs were underway. She had started attending regular meetings here twice a week. Avery. A young female counselor named Sarah approached her. There's a request from the families of victims to hear about your experience. Of course, we won't force you. Avery caught her breath for a moment. Talking about her experience meant touching still healing wounds. Let me think about it, she replied quietly. Outside the window, the evening sky was beginning to turn a crimson shade. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Excuse me, Matthew entered. He was holding a new proposal for the support program. That's perfect, Sarah said cheerfully. Could you two go over the details together? I have another appointment. The room was left with just Avery and Matthew, and the air suddenly felt heavier. Coffee? Matthew began to ask when Avery also said tea. They accidentally spoke at the same time and exchanged a small smile. The rooftop cafeteria was empty at this hour. The Manhattan evening scene gently enveloped them. About the meeting with the victims' families, Matthew started quietly. There's no need to push yourself. Avery cradled her cup with both hands and gazed into the distance. How did you get over it? You must have been involved in various cases at the FBI. Matthew thought for a moment before answering. I haven't completely gotten over them. Just turning those experiences into something that can help others. That's the path I've chosen. Was it all an act, the first time we met? It was supposed to be. Matthew looked earnestly into Avery's eyes. But as I got to know your sincerity, the line between acting and reality blurred. The time with the children at the special needs school, our talks in Central Park, that wasn't acting. The evening breeze gently swept between them. Honestly, I still can't fully forgive you, Avery admitted. But I genuinely respect what you're doing now. Matthew nodded silently. It was important to take time to rebuild trust, something the activities at the support center had taught him. Let's review the proposal. Avery straightened up. Matthew smiled and opened the document. Their shadows stretched long into the sunset. 1 year later, in the autumn, Central Park was ablaze with the colors of fall. The support center had grown into one of the nation's leading facilities for victim assistance, thanks to the cooperation between Avery and Matthew. From an office window, Matthew watched Avery counseling a victim's family. She had started holding sessions once a month to share her experience. It was a hesitant start, but now it seemed she was finding true value in it. Today is my father's death anniversary. Avery visited Matthew's office after the session. A breeze that hinted at the changing seasons gently rattled the window. Will you come with me? At her words, Matthew paused, as if doubting his ears. Although they had been repairing their relationship through center activities and occasional meals with other staff, this was the first time she had invited him to a private place. As they arrived at the cemetery, dusk was approaching. This historic cemetery, located in the heart of Manhattan, was enveloped in a tranquil air. Avery placed white lilies on her father, Thomas Morgan's grave. My father always said that true wealth has meaning only when used for the happiness of people. Matthew listened in silence. After Victoria's trial ended and the truth about my father's death was revealed. And through working here, helping others who've had similar experiences. Avery looked up at the sky. I feel like I'm starting to move forward. The sunset cast long shadows on the tombstone. The sound of a wind chime carried on the breeze. Avery, Matthew began. I have something I want to tell you. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. What's this? It's my last paycheck from the FBI. Matthew unfolded the envelope. It's the same amount Victoria offered me as payment. I want to donate it to the Victim Support Fund. Avery gasped. It was an act signifying a break from the past. Are you sure about your decision? Matthew looked at Avery earnestly. If you can forgive me, I'd like to stay by your side from now on. I promise, no more lies. Avery was silent for a while, but eventually, she nodded slightly. Let's build trust slowly, one step at a time. The setting sun bathed them in a gentle light at the gravesite. Avery felt as if her father's spirit was surely smiling within this light. "How about we grab some coffee on the way back?" she suggested shyly, and Matthew's eyes moistened slightly. The following spring, a modest wedding ceremony was being held in a corner of New York. The venue, a restaurant with over a century of history, exuded elegance and offered views of a beautifully verdant park through its large windows. Avery was dressed in a simple white gown. Unlike the lavish cathedral ceremony of before, today's ceremony was filled with genuine love and trust. "It's a truly lovely place," smiled Sarah, a counselor from the support center. The attendees were staff from the center, people who had received support, and close friends of the couple. The event might not have been flashy, but it was surrounded by warm blessings. Outside the window, the spring sunlight filtered through the trees, gently swaying the new leaves. Exactly 1 year ago, Avery and Matthew had discussed a new project for the support center at this location. At that time, they could not have imagined a day like today. "Everything is ready." A wedding planner approached them. Avery took a deep breath and headed towards the venue. Matthew was waiting in a simple tuxedo, accompanied by his best man, John, a former colleague from the FBI. Unlike the previous ceremony, there was no hint of pretense in Matthew's expression today. "We've taken a long detour," Avery spoke during their vows. "But it's that journey that has shaped us into who we are today." The grief of losing loved ones through senseless violence. While we cannot heal that pain, we can support those who share it. Now, we want to walk that path together. Matthew responded with heartfelt words, very different from the written notes of the past. "Your strength and kindness have saved me many times. My days chasing the truth as an FBI agent taught me what true justice is, and what it means to empathize with another's pain. You taught me that. I promise to continue being the man who lives up to all of that." Spring sunlight streamed through the stained glass, enveloping them in its warmth. Unlike the previous ceremony's false vows, this place was filled with pure love and a solid hope for the future. As the celebration progressed, people from the support center began to speak one by one about how much Avery and Matthew had helped them heal. Each word added blessings to their new journey. 2 years later, one day in their new home on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, morning light filled their brownstone. Unlike the old penthouse, this smaller home was filled with an unprecedented warmth. "How about this?" Matthew asked as he served freshly made pancakes, which had become his weekend routine. "Perfect." Avery smiled in response. Her abdomen was now noticeably rounded, signaling the presence of new life. On the table lay the New York Times, proclaiming Morgan Investments' Wins Award for Best in Social Impact Investing, next to an article about a new branch of the Victim Support Center. "Isn't it strange how everything turned out?" Avery mused, gazing out the window. "All those sad events led to this. I'm sure my father would be pleased." Matthew gently squeezed her hand. "Let's keep walking this path together." The morning light enveloped them, illuminating the past and warming the hope born from it. This spring, the support center was about to start a new program designed for children who had lost loved ones in accidents or crimes. Avery and Matthew, along with their staff, were ensuring their experiences were passed on to the next generation. Their smartphone vibrated on the table, signaling the countdown to the due date. "Matthew, one day I want to tell our child that people make mistakes. But it's possible to face those mistakes, make amends, and find a new path." Matthew nodded deeply. Their story would continue, a journey of empathizing with wounded hearts and weaving new hopes. And above all, a testament to how true love can heal and lead. After breakfast, as usual, they prepared to head to the support center. A new day was about to begin.